Hello, Miss Adams here. Chapter 1, Reading for Thinking. We're going to talk about active reading strategies. Active reading strategies are something that you would use, an effective reader would use during reading, especially when the material is a little dry, or maybe it's not necessarily something you want to read, but you have to read, or maybe even when it's really interesting and you want to make sure that you remember all the important points. So active reading works for a variety of reasons and for a variety of the reasons that y'all listed in your Getting to Know You section of your discussion board. So the first letter in the acronym is S for survey. And surveys where you typically look over the chapter or the paper that you're about to read and you pick out the topic, and many times you can conclude the main idea and you can get a general summary. So you would open your chapter and you would read every title, every subtitle, look at every graphic table, chart that's listed. Especially in our Reading for Thinking, there's going to be bullets that are really going to clarify the main idea. Other textbooks might not have bullets, but they'll have pictures, things written in the margin to guide you and give you a reason for reading, let you know what you're about to embark on. Pictures, different things. So the topic's typically going to be pretty clear. It's going to be whatever's repeated throughout the chapter. For example, our topic is active reading strategy, the SQ3R reading strategy. The main idea would be that effective readers can use the SQ3R strategy to guide them in their reading and get the most bang for their buck when they read. A summary would be defining the acronym and describing briefly how it would help a reader during their reading process. Hopefully I'll give you a brief summary in this video. The next is question, the next letter in the acronym. Question, what about it? What does the author want me to get from this? I'm not talking about the questions at the end of each section. I'm talking about the questions that I form in my own mind about it. So it's kind of like the KWL chart that we did in grade school. We list what we know, and then we list what we want to know in the form of a question. So our question for this chapter might be, what is active reading? And what is SQ3R, and how could it help me? And we would jot those questions down before reading to help us guide our notes, and we'll talk about that further. A good way to make an outline. Reading, when you read, you're going to annotate, and we're going to talk about that later in the next slide. Highlighting and underlining. We don't want to annotate or highlight or underline the entire chapter, because then when we go back to study, we have to read the entire chapter. Annotating is notes, not rewriting a paragraph. So if you can read a paragraph and jot down 3 to 5 words, you're doing really well at your annotations. Reciting is when we can paraphrase and organize our notes and our ideas. Paraphrasing is something that all college students need to learn, and that's simply when you read something that an author wrote or said, you want to be able to look away from the text and not copy the person word for word. Otherwise, you run into the danger of plagiarizing. And plagiarizing is the number one thing that can get you kicked out of college. Stealing other people's ideas is an offense. So you need to learn how to paraphrase. Paraphrasing is useful especially when you're reading, and because when you read, you'll recite back to yourself what it is the author's really telling you. When you're able to verbalize what you're reading, then you are probably learning it. It's just like that math problem that you had back in school, and you went to your mom, and it could be a science problem, any problem, but you went back to your mom, dad, teacher, and they asked you what it was you didn't understand, and when you started talking about the problem, the little light came on. Once you start repeating it back to yourself, sometimes we do know it, we just need to put it into our own words to make it understandable. And that's what paraphrasing is. Organizing notes, we'll speak more on that a little in this chapter and a lot in some of our subsequent chapters. Review, that's where we go back and read our organized notes and we check our understanding, go back and look up some of our facts and make sure we're ready for an exam test or for our common knowledge so that we can start our career. Next, let me put this over here. Next, I want to go a little further into surveying just quickly. When we survey, we get our topic. The topic of this book is Reading for Thinking. That's the title. The title helps me with the main idea. It's how do I think about my reading while I'm doing it? What do they mean by reading for thinking? So reading does help us think. It helps us form new ideas. It teaches us new ideas, and it helps us come up with some wonderings of our own. So the main idea is going to be the combination of the titles, the subtitles, the graphics in the book. Another good thing I'd like to mention about the SQ3R, the survey, is that most textbooks do have a summary at the end of the chapter where they sum up what the main points of the chapter. If you didn't read anything in your chapter at all, you would want to read the titles, the subtitles, look at the pictures, and read the summary. And I should add that down there. Do not forget to read the summary. The summary is what you want to know and what the author wants you to know. And obviously, I'm not used to writing this way. So do not forget to read your summary. Your summary is pretty much all the facts in the chapter in a nutshell. So a little on annotating. You can find more ideas on page 18. I just highlighted some of them. You should develop an annotation symbols for yourself. You can copy them from a textbook such as this one on page 18 or any other strategies you might have learned in another class that you brought with you from high school. But here's some suggestions. You might want to use arrows for cause and effect. You might say, oh, well, we had a war with England because we didn't like the taxes that King George was imposing, or King George imposed taxes because he felt Americans should pay for the war. And you would draw arrows to these ideas, box important names, use diagrams. This is a cause and effect, but you could add boxes and turn it into a timeline very easily. Circles, you might circle all dates, double underline main ideas, and put stars on crucial information. You could use stars for new information. You could use question marks for things you didn't know that you find exciting. There's a whole list of them on page 18. And again, you can come up with some of your own. If you stay consistent with your annotation symbols, I think it will help you so that when you look back, you know why you marked it that way. And this will keep you from highlighting the entire text so that you don't spend just as much time spending it the first time as you do reviewing for any test or to make sure you've learned the content. Next, let's talk about the 3 R's. Read one, that's where you do your annotating. You could use an outline, and we will use outlines in this class. We'll talk about them later. But you would outline titles, subtitles, keywords. visuals, write a little jot about them. You could answer some of the questions that you posed in the question part of your SQ3R, and any new ideas that you might have learned. You might have misconceptions, and you could clarify those in your outline. So that's what reading, the first time you read, and a lot of times I'm guilty. I don't want to scratch up my new notebook. I might want to sell it back to the college, but this actually prevents me from getting the most out of reading. One solution would be to use the sticky notes and put sticky notes, but it really is worth the cost. You're here, it's your time, it's worth your cost. You're not going to get that much back for them anyway. Go ahead and mark them up. Mark them up to where they're understandable to you and they're useful for you because they are your tool. Next we have read 2, which is recite. And recite again is organizing and paraphrasing. So some of the organization strategies might be timelines, double bubbles, T-charts, there's lists of them, flow charts, brace maps, things that you've probably remembered from high school or even elementary school that we can use to help us organize our ideas. Many times if we have any kind of problem comprehending, when we put it in a format that's organized and visual, it's easier for us to retrieve that from our brain. So it's a proven strategy. It was first used with special ed students, but as we've gained more and more knowledge, it's beneficial to everybody. We have way too much these days, multitasking, way too much to remember. So using a graphic organizer makes it more readily retrievable from our memory and more useful for us now. Finally, read 3, test your understanding. So when you look at your notes, if you don't understand your notes, you go back and read that section again of your textbook. Look at your textbook. Look at the questions at the end of the chapter. See if you understand the questions. If you don't, that would be a time to go back and read them. Also, I like with my students, and a lot of times I teach English language learners, I like to use the web. I get some good visuals there so that they can see what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm talking about sheepdogs or sheep herders, and nobody's ever heard of a sheep herder in Dallas, Texas. So if I Google that or use a search engine to find that, I can get a video perhaps, some visuals, and really show the idea of what I'm talking about to my students. And I could also show what an author is talking about to myself by using these tools. Again, you need to check your sources from the web, make sure that they are reputable sources, maybe not too biased, neutral sources to make sure you're getting good information. Thank you, and I hope to see you guys next week. And don't forget to post to the discussion board. Thanks.